You are listening to the Love and Money podcast with Shakira Brown. Today I have a very special guest, Mark Levine. Thank you for being on the show, Mark.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Mark. So I'd like to start off by asking you to tell us who you are and what do you do?
In my real life, I'm in the book publishing business, and I run a company that manages all the translation rights for about 50 book publishers. So that's what I do in my real life. In my side life, I am a domain name investor. And I've been really doing that as part of owning several companies over the last 20 years. But it's kind of grown into a business in and of itself. And it's great. It's really like it's a hobby and a passion and a business. And if you can have all three of those, it's pretty amazing.
Okay. So very interesting, Mark. So what is your background?
So I've, just been a business person. I mean, I've always been an entrepreneur, and I'm a person who I love creating things. And, I started in fourth grade, I would go down to the pet store, buy guppies, take them home to my parents' dismay, breed them, and then take the little babies and sell them back to the pet store. And so I've always done just a number of things, and really probably around the year 2000, I started a business that did online business filings, and it grew pretty quickly. And then as part of that, I was doing a lot of work with writers who were copywriting their books, and I just had all this research on all these self-publishing companies that I was going to try to partner with, where my company would provide the copywriting services. And I ended up putting together a resource guide about self-publishing, and it turned into a big selling book in self-publishing. And then I ended up owning a self-publishing company for 10 years that I sold in 2016 to a large competitor. And, then I took a couple years off and started this new business where we manage the translation rights. But that entire time I was buying and selling domains. That's probably the one constant in my business life in the last 20 years.
Okay. That's interesting. So how did you get involved in domain investing? And can you explain what domain investing is for people who are unfamiliar with it?
So that is, I'm going to assume that most people know what a domain name is. I mean, they probably have to use it to get to your podcast to listen to it, and most, in any other kind of daily life. So what I do, and others, is it started out by where I was buying names that were related to the business I was doing. So I would own a name like copyrightyourbook.com or selfpublishyourbook.com, those kind of things. And back when I first started, you could use a name like that and you could advertise under it. You could buy Google ads, so I could test different domains, but with the same ad. They don't allow that anymore. So, but I always just thought like I would buy domains around my business, and that someday if I went and sold the business, that portfolio of names would add additional value. And for me, it did. But now what I do is I'm just buying names that I think are cool, or that somebody else might, also think is cool and want to buy at some point down the road. So it's speculative in that, it's a guess. I try to make educated guesses, but you don't really know. So it's kind of like gambling. It's kind of like working in an advertising agency. It's kind of like playing the stock market, because there are some statistical things that are involved. And so it has elements of all that. And it's very fun, and it can become very addictive at times because, like anything else, you buy something for $10 and you sell it for $1,000. Well, you certainly want to try to replicate that. And it's not easy to do. If you're a great domain investor, you are going to sell 2 to 3% of your names every year.
Mhm.
So, while there's very little barriers to entry because you can register. I mean, obviously, a lot of great names are taken, but you can register almost anything, and there's a ton of extensions. But it takes discipline and it takes a lot of practice to, make it sound easy. It's not easy. I spend a lot of time doing it, and I've been doing it, every day. I might look at 5,000-6,000 names that are coming available that day, and I'm quickly going through a list and just glancing, and if something catches my eye. And then there's, secondary markets where you can bid on names at auctions, and it can get quite involved. But there are some great resources out there for people who are interested in starting. Because, some people just really have a gift with words and how words fit together. And, it's something that I would say to someone if they wanted to get into it, that they take whatever amount of money they can afford not to see again. And that's what they use to buy domains to start. Because it's, like I said, you're selling 1 to 2%. So if you buy 100 names and they're decent, so let's say you're paying $20 a name, you have $2,000 in it, and you might sell 1 or 2 if you get really lucky over the course of the year. But you have to know what people are looking for. You have to, like for me, I started in my own niche of publishing. So I bought names that were all related somehow to book publishing, and maybe not directly, but they had the word book or story or novel or printing or publish. So I've continued to buy those names. And most of the time when I sell a name that has one of those words in it, it's often not related to book publishing at all.
Okay.
But I'm buying in an area that I'm very familiar in. So, I would suggest that people start there. There are some great podcasts where you can learn a lot about domain investing for free. And then there's someone I know in the industry puts on a really amazing course that it's probably stuff that took me 10 years to learn just on my own. And he puts on this course, and by the time people get through it, they can really go out and have a chance of being profitable doing this. But, I think the course is now, maybe $500. So I always advise anyone who's asked me just what you did is first listen to some of these podcasts.
Mhm.
And then if you still are interested, then go look at the course. And then, that buying that course is a better investment than going to buy 20 names, because it's going to stop you from buying bad names.
Okay. So for someone who's new, who's interested in getting into it, you would advise them to start with listening to the podcast?
Right. I'll tell you a couple right now.
Okay.
Domain Sherpa is a great podcast. The Brandable Insider is a great podcast. Kickstart Commerce is a great podcast. Domain Name Wire is a great podcast. These are ones that I listen to all the time, and they're really geared toward any kind of level of domain investing. And I would certainly start there. A lot of these podcasts I've been on, I think, probably every one that I mentioned. And it's also just a lot, people who are in different areas of the domain industry, but a lot of domain investors. So you really hear a lot about their stories. And then if anyone has any interest, I would say the course is called DN Academy for domainname.academy.com. And I would go there, and I haven't been there in a while, so I don't know what the pricing is, but it's an excellent course. And so the next step that I would say for anyone is listen to some podcasts, and if you're still interested, then go take that course. Make the first investment you do in domain investing this course. And then after that, take $500 or $1,000, and on GoDaddy they have an auction platform called GoDaddy Auctions. And they have domains that are called closeouts, which means it went through the entire auction and nobody bid. And I pick up names like that all the time, and you can get them for anywhere from $5 to $50. And you're not in an auction, so you're not getting caught up in bidding on something that you're not, an auction can go from $12 to $5,000 in a matter of minutes. So it's a better way to start just by buying a closeout name, where you can just go press the buy button and you can have it for $5, $11, $30. And, that's what I would do after I took that course, where you have some training on how to spot names that might even have value.
Okay, so you gave out a lot of good information. So, yeah, I was going to ask you if you need a lot of money to get started. And you were saying,
well, you don't, because you don't, in that you can take $10 right now, go to GoDaddy, type something in, and if it's available, you can buy it and you can put it up for sale the same day. But to be, and most every domain investor has started that way. I started buying some names here and there, and then all of a sudden I sold one, and then I took the money and I bought some more, and that's how it goes. But it would be pretty difficult to say, okay, I'm going to take $500 and start, and all of a sudden I bought 10 names and I sell every name in the year, and I've made a couple $1,000s a name. That would be almost a statistical anomaly. I mean, it almost couldn't happen. But so again, like I just said at the beginning, I would say take an amount of money that you are okay to never see again.
okay.
And that's the right amount of money. And I used to tell this to people when I had my self-publishing company, the exact same thing. People want to self-publish a book. And I said, okay, it's very difficult to sell a book. So you can't count on that you're going to sell X amount of copies to make your money back. So I would say the same thing. Whatever amount you're okay to not see again, that's what you would put into a book or domain investing, I'm a more, from a investment standpoint, I'm a more cautious person. So, I mean, even if I was just starting out and I had $10,000 burning a hole in my pocket, I wouldn't just start, I wouldn't buy $10,000 worth of domains in my first couple months of doing it.
Right.
But you easily could. I mean, it's, it can go pretty quickly. That could be 100 names, or that could be 2 names.
Okay. Mark, how lucrative is domain investing, and what are some of the pitfalls?
Okay, well, for me at this stage in doing it, it's extremely lucrative. I mean, it's better than any kind of return on any investment I could have. I mean, again, this is for me. I have a very large portfolio now, and I sell a decent percentage that pays for renewing all the names and all the names I buy. So it can be very lucrative, but to get to that level, it's going to take time and money.
Okay.
So I think it's very difficult for it to be lucrative right away without you getting lucky. If I'm just trying to think of an example. If 10 years ago, well, even 10 years ago, it'd probably been too late, but let's say 15 years ago, you registered Bitcoin.com. you would be very wealthy. But you have to be that far in front of trends a lot. Like you couldn't get Bitcoin dot anything today. There's, I don't know, 400 or 500 different extensions, and it wouldn't be available in any of them today. So the pitfalls are that the money can go quickly, and if you haven't studied it and taken the time to learn how it works, you could be upside down pretty quickly.
Okay, that makes sense, Mark. Um, so, Mark, what is your favorite book, or what are you reading now?
Okay, well, my favorite book of all time is called Game Change, and it was about the 2008 presidential election, and they ended up making it into a movie on HBO. So that was one of the books that I never wanted it to end. And in terms of what I'm reading now, because I'm now back in publishing and we have so many books that are cycling through our company, because I spend all my day job talking and thinking about books, I have to spend my night hours, streaming something that's mindless. So I could give you a lot of good recommendations on shows.
Okay, Mark, last question. Where's your favorite place to travel?
A great question. And I saw that earlier and I was like, okay, well, how would I answer this? So, there's a million conditions. Like, is it the US? Is it not the US? But I'd say my favorite place to travel is probably Portugal, but followed very closely by Italy. And see, I'm a food traveler. So
Oh, I love
all my, all my, so, but then, I also love, as a food traveler, you never can go wrong in New York, Miami. Those are some great food cities.
I've never been to Portugal or Italy.
Well, I was just in Portugal, obviously not last summer, but the summer before for a domain conference. And it was my first time also, but it was fantastic.
Okay, Mark. Well, where can people go to find you if they would like to learn more about domain investing?
So I invite, anyone who listens to your show, they're welcome to contact me. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm a big believer in paying it forward. So my website is domaintheory.com, and it's just mark@domaintheory.com is my email address. And, have anyone who wants can contact me, and I'm happy to share some of the links to some of the podcasts I told you, and I get them a link to that course if they have any interest, and just, answer any questions. I'm happy to do it.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for being on the show.
All right. Now, thanks for having me.